Hello and welcome to this video, and I'm so pleased to have with me Joe Fry from the YouTube channel JOJO Fry Rocks. Did I get that correct?
You did. Thank you very much, Andy. JOJO Fry rocks, as it
Now, the
were.
reason the reason why I wanted to chat to you, well, the original reason why I wanted to chat to you, because you reached out to me about jazz, rock, and prog, and I think we'll do that at a later date. But I went and
Okay.
had a look at your channel, and what I found very interesting is you've been championing Kurt Cobain's guitar playing, and you've been saying he's a great guitar player, and you've been getting pushback from grumpy, probably middle-aged men saying, "You can't say that. What about Alan Holdsworth?" Which is what I think I said that to you, didn't I, in a private message?
You see, I've no idea. I don't know Alan Holdsworth. This is the thing, but I get it's not just from that kind of pseudo intellectual point of view. It's just guys who think that they themselves are better guitarists than Kurt Cobain, or that their mate Steve, who plays in a band, in a terrible
Yeah.
covers band in a pub on a Friday night, is better than Kurt Cobain. And that's why I called my video, "Your mate Steve is not a better guitarist than Kurt Cobain."
So anybody watching this video, you've got to head over to Joe's channel because there's a certain something special about it. And you did message me quite a while back, didn't you, about doing a collaboration? And what did I do?
You didn't get back to me.
I just ignored you, didn't I? So I have to I have to confess to the fact I did ignore you. But what happened was, because I haven't said this to you, another one of my patrons came on and he said, "Andy, you really need to check this channel out, and I really think you should be talking to this lady." So that is why I got in touch.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember who
Oh
it
well,
was. So
thanks
this is
to
why we're
that
all
person.
here. And going there, what I found very interesting is the way you've been championing guitarists, particularly Kurt Cobain, who is from one of the greatest rock bands of all time. And it starts to get into this area of what do we classify as a good guitarist? What are our parameters for what we would say is a good guitarist? And
Right.
you have not said, "I'm not talking about skill, I'm on about his song." You think he's a very skillful guitarist, which I
I
have.
do.
I think I think there's a little pearl of truth there. And now you are the expert because I don't know Kurt Cobain's guitar playing at all, really, except for my ears just hearing it. Whereas you have
Hmm.
obviously done a deeper study of it. So could you just explain why you have focused on Nirvana and what that means to you and what you do and about your guitar playing in the channel? Just fill us in on who you are first before we get into it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started my channel kind of last year. Um, I've put as a bit of a joke. The sort of tagline is, "Be nice. Come on, this is my midlife crisis." Um, and it's a bit
We're
of a
not at your
joke,
midlife
but
yet. You're not near the midlife yet. We're all living
43,
longer. If
43
you're
is
having a
old enough.
midlife crisis, what sort of crisis am I having?
Oh yeah, you're on your next one probably.
Oh,
But no, I just sort of felt like I'm, I'm at this point in my life where um, I'm obviously not gonna kind of ever do music seriously. I'm never gonna be like in a band or be famous or anything like the kind of things that you think maybe when you're younger and you're in your 20s that you
how
kind
long
of
have you
think
been
might.
playing the guitar, Joe?
Oh, since I was 7 years old,
Oh my
so
God. Did you
a
have lessons?
really really long time.
Did you have lessons?
No, never had lessons. Never had lessons. My dad taught me initially to play guitar, so he knew like three or four chords. I think he's never learnt more than that. But he was, he loves music. He always loved the Beatles, Elvis, the Beach Boys, all those kind of things from his generation. And my family are from up north, from just outside of Liverpool, actually. So they grew up basically, my aunts and uncles grew up going to watch like the Beatles play in the Cavern in Liverpool and stuff like that. So that was a kind of very important thing in my family, very important musical influence. So my dad could play guitar. He'd been playing since he was a kid and at school. And when I would kind of listen to him at home playing guitar, I really, really wanted to learn how to do that. you know, he could sing as well, and he would sort of like entertain us with songs and stuff. So he taught me the sort of 3 or 4 chords that he knew. And we would get sort of like Beatles songbooks, and you know, he'd sort of teach me some of the easier stuff. So I've been strumming like Beatles chords and songs since I was a kid, but as I got a little bit older, grew up in the 80s and 90s, so brilliant time for rock music.
And so is rock music is your primary
It's
love, isn't it?
That's my thing. That is my
And what
thing.
so what bands would that be?
So sort of all of the bands that you'd imagine from that time,
Winger?
from
I'm imagining
well,
Winger.
I do like them actually. They're not
Well,
one of my favorite ones, but I do have a soft spot.
Rat. Rat.
I think they were a bit like, I was a bit too young, I think. But
Oh, you're making me feel old again.
I did get into sort of like your Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, the really big ones at that time. Those are the kind of like main 80s ones. But then as I was getting a bit older and getting into my teenage years in the 90s, we had all the kind of 90s rock, which I, you know, broadly everyone calls it grunge, and grunge isn't even a thing, and we're not going to go into that right now because that's a whole other discussion.
They're like, it's like a number of
It's
totally different bands, isn't it?
It's not a thing.
No.
Yeah. So I did get into those bands. So the kind of like, you know, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Screaming Trees, Mudhoney, like all of those kind of American Seattle-based bands, if you like. Stone Temple Pilots, although they're not from Seattle. Smashing Pumpkins, and they're not grunge either, and they're from Washington. So, you know, all of that stuff in the 90s. When I started sort of learning electric guitar, that basically came about because I got into Nirvana, and I loved it, and I wanted to be able to play Nirvana songs.
I am listening, Joe. I've kicked my cable out of my laptop. And it just said
That's
you're going
cool.
to run out
That's
of
fine.
Oh, I'm plugged back in there. Carry on.
So I got a guitar, electric guitar, for my 13th birthday, Fender Squier Strat, because, you know, that is the law. Thou
I think
shalt
they're
have
ridiculous
Fender
guitars.
Squier.
Fender Squier Strats. That's my main guitar still now.
They are the, you know, archetypal guitar in my book. Like, that's what a guitar is. It's a Fender Squier Strat. But obviously, what I really wanted was a Jag Stang, obviously, because I wanted to play like Kurt. So, but he played Squier Strats. He played all sorts of guitars.
So when Nirvana a really important band to you, were they the sort of main band?
Super important to me, because when you're 13, you're a kid, and you want to be able to rock out. As much as I loved sort of Guns N' Roses and Bon Jovi, those bands, you know, they're not the bands that made me think, oh, I'm going to pick up a guitar, I'm going to sound like Slash, you know, or yeah, I'm just going to kind of rock a Richie Sambora solo kind of thing. That sort of didn't inspire a beginner sort of teenage guitarist. It was more the attitude and the just the kind of rawness, I suppose, of Nirvana's kind of whole presentation. And I can remember them on Top of the Pops. It was the first time that, I mean, I'd been too young for like punk in the late 70s, early 80s. I was just a really little kid. So when I saw, I guess I must have had the same reaction as, you know, people slightly older than me would have had to seeing like punk bands for the first time. Because when you've grown up with like really polished sounding music and really kind of well produced and put together bands that had like an image and everything, then on Top of the Pops you see these guys and it's just kind of chaos and nobody quite knows what's happening, and you're like, what even is this? But you just felt something. It just really made you feel something that you hadn't felt before, as a kid anyway. So that really left an impression on me, and I just thought, I want to be able to play this, and I want to plug my guitar in and just crank it up, and kind of get Smells Like Teen Spirit on the go and kind of blast that out in my bedroom.
That's 30 years ago now, over 30
Mm.
years ago. What happened in the interim between then and now? I mean, did you play in
Oh,
bands? Did you take the
yeah,
guitar in?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
I did. So when I was at school, I was, all my friends kind of felt the same way as I did about the kind of music that was around at the time. So there were quite a few people that I knew who played in bands. And when I was at school and college, we did some gigs. We played at our school, and we played some hilarious gigs. I can remember one in like a sort of village hall where we played for like a Halloween disco for the scouts or something. Um, I think I was about 17, and
mm.
you know, with all these little kids, and we're trying to sort of play Nirvana and stuff. It was exactly as cringy as you can, as you're imagining. Um, but I loved it. It was great fun. And when I got to university, I sort of tried to carry on with that, and did end up at one point putting together an all-female band, which was great. We were called Rebellion Blonde, and we did a few songs. We played a few gigs locally. We made a music video. All of this stuff's on my channel. So I got some old video footage of us like playing in a pub in Exeter, and it's all a bit shambolic, really. But it was great. It was great. I loved it. So I've always loved kind of playing live. I always do whenever I can. Anyway, I always used to do like acoustic open mic nights and stuff. I am that terrible person that if you've ever had a house party that's gone on until like 4 in the morning, I'm the person who will like I'll find your acoustic guitar and play my terrible cover versions of songs that you probably hate, um, until 4 in the morning.
so
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 yeah,
how did the YouTube channel start up?
just because I felt like I hadn't done anything musical or guitar related for quite a long time. I've had quite a bad problem. I had a frozen shoulder, and that kind of the saga of that went on for about 2 years, and I hadn't been able to play because it was too painful.
Hmm.
So until I got that like sorted out, I had a little procedure and had some physio and stuff. I'd put all my guitars away, and it was all very depressing. And I felt like I wasn't doing anything creative or musical. So when I started to feel like I could play again, I thought, I want to do something, even if it is just singing some cover versions of songs and putting them out on YouTube. Just sharing that, I just want to do something. So I started off just doing that, but then I used to watch a lot of guitar YouTube as well. I still do, and I thought, well, night after night, I'm sitting here watching more or less these sort of like middle-aged American guys talking to me about stuff I already know about guitars, and I thought, there aren't any women doing this really on YouTube. There were some who were doing more sort of guitar lessons. There are some excellent like female
There's
guitar
Mary
YouTubers.
Spender.
Yeah, Mary's great, and I've been following her and watching her for a while. But obviously,
You
she's
know
an
what winds me up with
artist.
Mary Spender? You know what winds me up about Spender?
What?
Is
What?
that
She's
she
too
all
good.
I think I'm the clickbait king. She's the clickbait queen. I will always click on it because she'll always go, something incredible's happened. You will not believe it. That's the title of the video. I
Yeah,
know what that is. And you find out
yeah.
she's just making another album or something like that.
Yes, so her thing obviously is that she's an artist, isn't she? She wants to obviously kind of use this to promote her work and her music, which is really good. I mean, she's super talented and really clever at what she does. But she is also kind of she's big mates with Rick Beato, I think she's a bit of a protege
That's why I don't
of
like her. You
his.
see, she's got a very good channel. She's a very good YouTuber, but she's too
Yeah.
chummy with Rick Beato
Mm,
and Adam Neely. Both of them she seems to know
yeah,
quite well, and I'm
she
very
does.
annoyed because, as you said before we started, I am really the British Rick Beato, you know,
You
and.
totally are. You are,
So
Andy.
I
You
think
are.
Rick needs to he needs to chum up with me. Not, you know, I thought I mean that I need to have him as a friend. That's all. I just want to be his friend. That's all.
Ah, but you're his competition, you see.
You think
So
that's what
that's
it
why.
is?
That's what it is. He
Because
doesn't want to. Yeah, yeah. He doesn't want to promote you because what if people want the British one and not him?
of course they'll want the
Um,
British one.
but yeah, I just kind of thought, well, I don't see any female YouTube channels doing this kind of thing. And what you see a lot, which is a great thing, but the female guitarists that you see on YouTube, they're excellent, right? They are amazing guitarists, and so they'll be on there. They'll be playing all this shreddy, like incredible stuff that
Mm.
I can't do. And they're also like they're really really attractive, and they're very well presented and put together, and it's very popular, and they get millions and millions of views. But that I thought, well, I don't see anyone out there who is just a very decidedly average guitar player, who loves guitars, who's really enthusiastic about guitars, and owns lots of guitars, and loves everything, and is
How
really
many guitars
geeky.
have you got?
Well, I've got six,
That's not too
and
bad.
it's not too bad, but for an average, the average person, that's probably too many.
Well, I've got
Um,
six.
but you are a musician, so like for someone who's not never been a professional musician, a hobbyist, um, who isn't, hasn't got loads and loads of money or anything, I just thought, well, actually, I could be talking and commentating on some of the stuff that's going on in the guitar world, my opinions about guitars and my opinions about music, because I'm a massive fan of music, mainly rock music. And, there's been lots of stuff going on that I've thought, yeah, I've got an opinion about that. I want to share my thoughts about that. And it will just be stuff like watching the recent documentary that came out last year about, or this beginning of this year, about Bon Jovi, for example. And I thought, well, Bon Jovi has meant a lot to me and has been a big part of my life. Richie Sambora has been my guitar hero for over 30 years. And I've got a lot to say about what happened in that situation and how it's been presented there. So for me, YouTube is a great way of like me, I suppose, sharing my thoughts about stuff
Well,
with people that
you are
might
actually
care.
when it comes to
Yeah.
guitars and the nature of guitars and certain rock bands, you are very knowledgeable, and I think you bring a wisdom to that. And I think when I brought out Mary Spender, what I'm
Mm,
very aware with Mary Spender and Adam Neely, because they're young, you feel like even though they got these massively successful YouTubes, that's not what they really want. They want to be
yeah,
famous and have a
they
successful
do.
career. And
Yeah.
I worked in the industry, and I look at it and I go, you're trying to have this career in music as an artist, and those type of artists that they want to be, they don't exist anymore. They don't.
No,
You can
no,
be
this is
one, but
it.
you won't make enough money. It's not like the old days. You've got to be able to finance it yourself. And so they are able to live their dream because they can finance it because of the YouTube. But you knew if they did have this sort of crossover success, which they won't because they're not in the realm where you would,
Yeah.
then they would drop the YouTube like like a shot. I think Adam Neely virtually has. He's just
He has kind of. He's
yeah.
stepped away big time. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's actually something going on here
Well,
because
even guys like Bradley Hall, like he's joined a band. Um, so he says he's going to carry on with his YouTube. But we'll see.
this is an interesting phenomenon
Yeah.
with music YouTubers. I've worked in the industry, I've made albums, I've played with famous people, I've done all that, and it was brilliant. But I've got to be honest, in terms of the creative fulfillment, I find the YouTube as fulfilling, if not more so. I feel like there's more freedom with my YouTube, and the bigger it gets, the more I can do whatever I want. You know, if I wanted to form a band, which I am in bands, and I do form bands,
I
and
was going to say, yeah, you
yeah,
do
I mean,
play
I was just
music
going to say,
anyway.
I like a sort of a in a thought experiment way, but I act. This is what I
Yeah,
do. I form bands. They're very esoteric, and yet people listen to them because of the channel.
yeah.
And so I think it's very interesting when you say, you never did it and you did all these things. I actually think that what you're doing is what musicians should be doing. If you're a guitar player now, you should be exploring your creativity through the things that exist like YouTube or Instagram or all those things. And you have to get that right, and I think they want to be in this old idea of a rock and roll band. Now, I bring this up because with the Oasis reunion next year,
Mm.
I've done quite a few videos on that, and I've been very positive about this. And I've been like going, all you middle-aged viewers who watch this, right? You moan that there's no real bands, there's no guitar bands. You moan about all this,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
Oasis come, and they start to do a tour, and suddenly it's the biggest thing in the music, and it basically wipes out everything else that's going on. And they're going to go out and play some real guitar-based music. Now, yes, Noel Gallagher is not Jeff Beck. We know this, right?
Yes.
We know that. But I'm really surprised that people can't sit back and go, I know he's not Jeff Beck, but why are they so good? Or what is it about this band that is taking everybody's eyes away from all the sort of drossy pop music that we were all complaining about, and suddenly going, oh, we're interested in this? And so when I saw your thing about Kurt Cobain, I thought it's the same thing going on. I mean, Nirvana trump Oasis in terms of importance in the history of rock music and popular music.
In terms of in all kinds of ways, just like cultural impact.
Yeah.
You know, it's well, I was interested in your video actually that you put out the other day, where you talked about these, I think it was 10 bands or 10 people that sort of like sowed the seeds of the downfall of music.
Which
And
wasn't
some,
criticizing those bands.
no, I
It
know, no,
wasn't,
no,
no.
I got that, and some of which I thought you were right, some of which I thought maybe not, um, but and Nirvana were on there, and I totally get what you were saying about. Well, it depends whether or not you agree with the thesis of grunge killed rock, which I don't
I
necessarily,
do.
because I think all of that was, and I'm going to make a video about this separately, I think, but all of that was actually imploding on itself
Yeah. Well, this is
by the
what this
90s.
video is about. This is why I
Um,
got you on, and this is why we're having the discussion of it, because I don't quite know. Your knowledge of these grunge bands is much greater than mine, although I do know about them, but yours is much greater, and you're of the generation that affected my relationship with the grunge bands was I'd actually started teaching at that point, and it was in the early
mm,
90s when the government brought in the B Tech Level 3 popular music courses. And so we set up these courses. I was involved in one of the very first of these courses, and we advertised. And what we didn't realize is that we'd had Nirvana, Soundgarden,
hmm
Pearl Jam, and so you suddenly had 40 kids in the room, all looking like they got dressed out of a skip. With all their guitars far too low to play anything proper. And that's where we started. It was such an incredible movement, which after the 1980s, you could have said that rock had died off then. I don't think you would have had a load of Bon Jovi fans turning up onto that course. But Nirvana
no,
crossed over. What is it about Nirvana that why them? And what is it? Because I believe there has to be some genius in that band, especially in Kurt Cobain, and not just his songwriting ability. There has to be a genius in the guitar playing. So, shall we
it's
actually look at you've argued that his guitar parts are actually relatively pretty difficult to play. So, can you describe Why you
They're
think that?
difficult to. It would be very, very difficult, and this is why, like, nobody. Have you ever heard anybody do a decent cover, right, of a Nirvana song? Have you ever heard anyone, a professional musician or
I've
anyone
worked
in
in
a
music
pub?
colleges. I know exactly what you mean. I have heard
Yeah,
literally hundreds of kids trying to play a Nirvana song. Usually smells like Teen
yeah,
Spirit.
and you've never heard it played in a way that sounds right, or a way that actually you think, oh, this is really good. Oh, that's better than how Nirvana played it. You haven't,
Mm.
you know. Whereas you take, more sort of like any other band, any other kind of, what people would call a technically proficient band, of musicians, and you can look at even like Beatles songs, and people can cover Beatles songs. Other bands can cover Beatles songs. People in the pub can cover Beatles songs, and
Mm.
they sound reasonable. You think, oh yeah, I like this. This is okay. This is listenable. But it doesn't work with Nirvana, because you can't do it like they did it, and it's not all down to his guitar playing, but that is a lot of it.
But
So if you
it's at
think
least a
about,
third, isn't it? It's at least a
well,
third in terms of the music.
but it's more than that, because there were only the three of them, okay, and they wanted to be a loud. He thought they were punk, so they wanted to be like a punk rock band. He had to find ways to completely fill out, create that wall of sound, and he did that with his playing, and that's down to his sort of techniques that he developed in order to do that, and kind of create those unique sounds that you
Can you
can't
explain what those
necessarily
techniques
do.
could be, just roughly, to get specifically down to what you would
Yeah,
say
I
they
mean,
were?
there are kind of like, there are some techniques that he uses in his playing to do it, but it is also about like how he used things like pedals, and how, the kind of particular effects that he used to do that. So it's a lot of chorus, it's a lot of fuzz, but they are sort of set up in a particular way, and the kind of guitars that he used to do that as well. But it's also in like the way he plays things, in terms of like, he will sort of deliberately hit, like where a lot of guitarists would, for example, when they're sort of fingering a chord, or playing a solo or something, they will mute. So they will kind of pick out particular notes to play in the solo, and mute the other strings with their fingers while they're playing. But he would deliberately not do that, and sort of hit open strings, for example, to give it a kind of louder and fuller
Mm.
effect. Um, there are a lot of people that say, oh, that's an example of, that's just the fact that he was sloppy. He was a sloppy player. He couldn't play guitar. No, he was doing that. That was a choice. That was a thing that he chose to do musically, because of the style of music that he wanted to play. It wasn't that he just couldn't play and he didn't know what he was doing, and somehow it ended up sounding good. He That was something that he'd done deliberately on purpose,
So yeah,
because he's the only guitarist in the band.
yeah, there's an issue here philosophically, which I want to try and tease out because I think it's a very important thing to explore. I'm sat here representing, I've got quite a lot of technique on the drums. I've also got a reasonable amount of technique on guitar. I know all my music theory. I can play all the scales and all that type of stuff. And I cover very, a certain type of progressive rock and jazz rock. So I'm over on one side of it. You're coming at it as a much more like your sort of rock guitarist. That's um, that idea where you get people and they put the guitar and they stand in the mirror and go, that's your line through, and identifying with certain bands. And the question is if we take technique to be method, then a great technician is somebody who applies the correct methods based upon the aesthetic situation that they're in. If you apply that to Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, you start to realize that they were very, very successful, and that there was 100 bands. Because I actually was going to do a video on the origins of the grunge scene. I started to search out and see how it all worked.
Oh, I can get into that if you want.
And what's interesting is that
Yeah.
there's a reason why it's Nirvana and not all these other bands, and everyone goes, oh, I like Pavement or the Pixies and all that type of stuff. And they were great bands, but there's something about Nirvana, because I can remember that first album coming out, and it just instantly just grabbed everybody, and that. So I'll tell you a story, and I've told this on the channel before.
Okay.
When I got the gig with Robert Plant, I borrowed a drum kit off Robert, and it turned out, to cut a very long story short, it was one of John Bonham's drum kits. So I'm sat there playing with Robert Plant and playing one of John Bonham's drum kit. And Robert comes in and he says, I've got this, I want to do this. And this is the arrangement. Have you got a drum beat, Andy? So I did a drum beat. And he was going, no, and he tried to explain what he wanted. I want it more like this, blah, blah, blah. And so I then started to rest on my chops and technique to come up with all sorts of clever stuff. And he went, no, that's far too clever. And I suddenly hit this wall that I realized it didn't matter how much physical dexterity I had. Robert was used to John Bonham coming up with When the Levee Breaks, or the or Good Times, Bad Times. And I knew that John Bonham hasn't got the technique of a jazz drummer, right? But Led Zeppelin fans believe he has. That there's certain rock musicians where people think they're the best in the world, but actually the reason why they're brilliant is because they come up with the right part at the right time. And that,
I
to
think
me,
this is
I suddenly shifted and went, that's the hardest thing to do in music.
it is, and I think that is worth like so much more than, because I say this in my video, right? I believe almost anyone can become an excellent guitarist, right? It's just a case of like spending hours and hours and hours and hours over a long period of time every day, like the likes of Steve Vai, spending 10 to 12 hours every day when they were a kid practicing, doing their scales, arpeggios, all the techniques. And almost anyone can do that. I mean, unless you're not physically able to or something, most of us human beings would have the capacity to do that. So that really, to me, isn't anything special. I could have done
problem
that.
is that people don't have the motivation to do it. So when I was
They
teaching in
don't,
music
but
colleges,
some of us might, and
yeah,
those
but
people did.
because kids would go, you're trying to teach music and you're trying to get this stuff across, and the kids want it. And I'm in a classroom, and this comes up, and they say, well, blah, blah, blah. How do you do it, Andy? What do I need to do? What do I need to work on? And I go, well, when I was your age, I was practicing 6 hours a day on drums, and then I would do 4 hours a day on guitar. So I was doing 10 hours a day every single day. And their faces all go. Now, I didn't do that because I was a conscientious person, because I really wasn't. What it was is that I had a sound I wanted, and it required me to do that to get to that sound. And I believe Kurt Cobain is exactly the same, and would have put the same amount of hours and was as excellent. But as you said, he was exploring how you're going to play these power chords, and what sort of pickups do you need, and what sort of tone am I going to get out of it? What amps do I do? And how do I take these chords and craft something that is like a melodic hook, which he was brilliant at, that actually also works with his vocals. And I watched a documentary last night on AC/DC, and they've basically got about 3 or 4 chords. But
Yeah,
I
the
came
whole
out thinking
thing.
Malcolm Young's a genius, because
Yeah.
nobody else could do it. They can, you go, oh, I know that tune. And I was watching Let There Be Rock, and Let There Be Rock is this moment where the AC/DC go from being a really good rock band to almost like God level rock. And you listen to it, it's one chord.
more or less. I
You
mean, it's yeah,
know, that bit,
yeah,
that's like three chords, and it goes. You know, the bit when he's doing the talking, I think it's just one chord, and yet it's a signature part. And I think this is really what I want to talk to you about, because I think this is something that gets forgotten by those sort of snotty types that think that the skill itself means somebody's good. Because I would
right.
argue,
Like,
I mean, Steve Vai, you mentioned Steve Vai. If you put on For the Love of God, that is on an album that sold 1 million copies. Because Steve Vai's got a way of playing melodies which is it's beyond his
yes,
technique. He's got a certain thing he does.
he is a very he's a very emotive
Yeah.
player, definitely, absolutely. But you look at, and obviously he's done, he's sold millions and millions of records, and so has Joe Satriani. So, and when I was a teenager, I knew who these guys were because I used to buy Tablet Guitar magazine. I used to kind of look at the guitar tabs that were in there to try and learn some stuff and listen to the little CD that came with it. And they always had like Yngwie Malmsteen, Joe Satriani, and these guys. And I'd be looking at these tabs and I'd have a go, and after about 10 minutes, I'd be like, nah, that
Because
isn't
the
happening.
truth was there wasn't that hadn't set you that hadn't
No,
inspired you in the same way as Nirvana
no,
had done.
no,
And I
because
think it'd be
it's really
very
good. It's really good. It's great. And if you watch and listen to any of those guys, if you see Joe Satriani playing live, I mean, he's absolutely incredible, incredible. But could I sit down and listen? Could I put on the CD "Surfing with the Alien" and listen to it in my bedroom as a 15-year-old? That's a hard listen. Like, and that's for coming from someone who loved guitars and loved electric guitar
when I
and
was
wanted to
15, that
learn
was an easy
guitar.
listen for me.
Really,
Oh God,
really.
yes. Yeah, I was listening to John Coltrane at 15. Charlie Parker. I just it's something that is in you, and that's why I did. I mean, I didn't know any music theory when I was 15, and I used to put Charlie Parker records on and pick up my guitar and try and play over those chord changes, right? And a lot of what I do now when I play jazz was developed then. I didn't actually know what I was doing. I learned all that later on. But actually, when I solo now and I play through chord changes, I still have to rely on this almost like psychic power that because where I was just trying to go, how can I do that? It's such, just by ear, forcing myself to get there. But the reason is because I was really driven to do that. I was really driven. I was interested in complexity. That was the thing for me.
Right.
I found that aesthetically really pleasing. I think I'd got ADHD and I got very bad anxiety as a teenager, and I needed to be almost overwhelmed by,
Mm,
like
okay.
cranked up
Sensory.
intensity, and
Yeah.
I needed to be able to put my ears in there and
Mm,
really focus on it and follow these complex lines.
mm.
And then you start working in the music industry and you realize that's not what they want. They want people who can actually play in a way that's accessible. So I would say
There
Satriani,
is something about that accessibility. It
yeah.
is. It is that. I
And I
mean,
think Satriani as a guitar player, his talent is he's actually more accessible than a guitarist like Alan Holdsworth.
oh, for
But
sure.
I
Like,
think
yeah,
I
he
think
is
we
because he's more rock based. He is more
yeah,
rock,
but also
and
he
then
plays
yeah,
tunes.
yeah, yeah,
That's the
yeah. He
thing. He
does.
plays tunes,
He
and
does.
they're hooky, and I think
But it's still a bit more in the sort of prog rock school than it is sort of pop or anything like that. And I think that's where the big crossover came for Nirvana. And as you said before, like as you've alluded to, that's sort of Kurt's talent was in sort of bringing that pop sensibility to this punk rock music. And so he's kind of blending the Beatles with kind of Black Flag, and he's kind of pulling from all of his influences, and sort of blending them together in a really unique way, and especially on guitar, I think is where you really kind of can hear it. because where he's kind of using some of those quite sort of dissonant or discordant sort of chord changes that do come up in more sort of complex Beatles songs, for example. That's where you get songs like About a Girl, which has got it's quite a hard one to sing. And if you've ever tried singing About a Girl, you know, it's not the easiest, because of the way it modulates. And, you can't tell me he didn't know what he was doing when
Yeah,
he's written a song like About a Girl.
that's very interesting. That's very interesting because if you take Smells Like Teen Spirit, for example, they obviously were jamming on More Than a Feeling by Boston because it's very
Yeah,
similar to that. And so what you could see from that, even though they saw themselves as punks, they were actually pulling from a whole wide range of different bands, like Queen, for example, Rush. You can
yeah.
tell they like Rush.
I don't know about that necessarily. I know he did like Queen. He said that various,
I'm more on about
many times.
um, Dave Grohl. That those drummers would have been.
Dave Grohl's into hardcore. He's coming from a real kind of hardcore punk background. His favourite bands are what's the band that Pat Smear was in? Was it the Maggots or something?
Yeah, yeah.
No, the Germs. The
Yeah.
Germs. Yeah, that was sort of his
But
musical.
what I'm saying is that generation had a set of influences that, say, the Sex Pistols or the Ramones have
Yeah,
not
yeah,
had.
yeah.
And I know that Dave Grohl's a massive Rush fan, and I also
Mm.
know that Kurt Cobain was a huge fan of Red by King Crimson.
Yes, yeah. That he has
And
kind of. I've
so
heard him
that
mention that,
angular
and
sound that you're because if you take
yeah.
more than a feeling riff, it's like More Than a Feeling, but it's modulated in an angular way. It's based upon a sort of minor third jump, and it goes up a minor
It's
third.
a lot of their stuff is minor thirds.
Yeah,
I
but
think
it's like a
he
parallel
was,
minor third moving, which
yeah.
is very King Crimson. There's a darkness in King Crimson on Red. I don't know if you know the album Red, but there's a darkness there that's quite Nirvana-esque that
I've not looked at that. I've listened to a little bit of In the Court of the Crimson King, which is one that I covered when I was looking into prog rock, and I would like to. I definitely do need to listen to some more King Crimson for
yeah,
sure.
check out the album Red. And
Hmm.
I think when it opens up on side one, you will hear Nirvana. Literally, it's not like Schizoid Man's quite heavy with that screamy vocal. That's quite interesting. But when you hear Red, because it's got this lumbering, almost like Black Sabbath sound, which I felt
Well,
Nirvana
they loved
also
Sabbath
had.
as well. You know, yeah, you can
So,
hear
so
that for
there's
sure.
a whole ton of influences there in that, and I find this very interesting. I would much rather have a world where we see a guitarist like Kurt Cobain the same as we see a Jeff Beck or an Alan Holdsworth, and we can just go aesthetically they're trying to do something, but their commitment to what they're trying to do is absolute. And these Kurt Cobain got the rewards, and changed the face of popular music because he was great. I think it's something that nobody wants to say nowadays. And I feel the same way with Oasis. I was in an Oasis covers band, a tribute band, and I started playing those
Yeah,
songs night after night. And then you start to think, can I write a song like this? No, no. It's like, and
exactly.
I can remember
This is
when I had to learn the songs for Oasis, they sent me all over. I remember putting the headphones on, and Champagne Supernova came on, and by the end of it, I was taken away. I was like, "This is amazing!" It's like top my
it's a
feet.
nice song. I do like Champagne Supernova actually. But I would argue even that you'd have because you were in that covers band. You would have a lot less difficulty learning and playing Noel Gallagher's guitar parts than you would have trying to learn Kurt's guitar parts. Sure. Um,
I
and
think I think you're totally right, and I think the other thing is that I did a video on power trios, the great power trios of all time. I think Nirvana got in it, and you realise there's not that many. because
No.
the sound's got to come from the trio. So
Hmm.
somebody has got to sing whilst playing parts that are more involved than just being like an Oasis guitar part. We got two guitarists and it's just a wall of open chords. With Nirvana, those guitar parts are specific and they have a function, which means rhythmically they will be diametric to the vocal.
And that's so hard to do as
It's
well. If
so
you've
hard
ever
to do.
tried to do it,
Yeah.
if you've ever tried to sing, I've always been trying to do this for as long as I've been trying to play guitar. Because one of the first riffs that I ever tried to learn was "Come as You Are," because in ostensibly that's quite straightforward. But you try and sing "Come as You Are" and play "Come as You Are" at the same time. It's like that kind of
Yeah.
rubbing your stomach, patting your head. It's like you say, it is diametric, and you need a certain level of skill on the guitar specifically to be able to have the muscle memory to do that riff whilst you're also
Yeah,
singing
that's
at the
what
same
I
time.
that is what I think is virtuoso about Nirvana. I mean, Dave Grohl,
Right.
it's all right. I've got no back to me. I'm actually sat on a weird box here because
Oh, I thought you were just doing your rocking thing like you
no, no,
do.
that's how I access the Edward spiel. But
Yes.
you put me off now. I can't even remember what I was talking about now.
So we're talking
It's
about
all
the
about Nirvana, wasn't it?
virtuosity of how singing and playing at the same time, some of the songs being kind of diametric in terms of the riff and the melody line and stuff.
Well, what I was going to say is that when Dave Grohl formed the Foo Fighters, one of the worst bands in history, but
Agreed.
when he formed the Foo Fighters, who are extremely competent, and that's not what my problem is with them. And I've got a video coming out, I think tomorrow, where I will really slate the Foo Fighters quite
Um,
seriously.
I
You'll enjoy
I
that.
just sort of off the record as well. Another thing I recently discovered about the Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl that makes me not like them even more than on account of their music is that they were they were massive supporters of an AIDS denialist organization in the 90s. They played benefit concerts for them. They spread dangerous disinformation on their websites, telling people that HIV doesn't lead to AIDS. You don't need to get tested. You don't need medication. Like it was disgusting. You never hear about this,
Send me the
and
link, and I'll put any. If you've
I'll
got a
send
link to
you.
that story, I'll put it in the
I
link
will.
of this video so the viewers,
Yeah,
because that's very interesting.
yeah. It's
What I was
awful.
going to say was something positive about them. I don't feel I should now. I think I should give him another
No,
kick
he's
in.
still a good. He's still a good drummer.
Well, the point is, what I was going to say was he played drums on the next album, on the first Foo
The
Fighters
first
album,
album.
and
Yeah,
then they
yeah,
started
yeah.
auditioning drummers for the next album, and nobody could bloody do it. And the reason why they couldn't do it because nobody could play as good as Dave Grohl. That his consistency on the drums is so difficult. In other words, this is what I'm on about virtuosity.
Mm.
I'm a very technical drummer, but if I'm laying down a straight rock beat in a studio, I have to start to focus because every needs to sound the same. So you can't hit off, one side or the other. You've
Mm.
got to hit in the exact same place with exactly the same pressure and in exactly the same motion. And then you get a snare drum that sounds exactly the same. Now, nowadays, bands don't need to do this because they'll just trigger one. Nobody actually plays on rock albums anymore. But in the old days, a drummer had to be able to do that if they were a great rock drummer. And people like Matt Cameron and Jimmy Chamberlain,
Matt Cameron.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and the other thing, so that there's a virtuosity there which isn't as obvious. Now, the other guy that I think is insane on the guitar is Chris Cornell.
He's
Chris
so
Cornell's guitar is
underrated.
ridiculously advanced,
Yeah, yeah. He's totally underrated. I mean, he was
totally
one of
underrated. I
these.
mean, obviously the greatest rock singer in history.
He's one of these guys who he could seemingly just do everything right because he started off as a drummer.
Yeah,
So he was the drummer to begin with, right? He thought he was a drummer, which is hilarious. But he can drum, like he was good. But he can do everything. He can play guitar, he can write songs, he can obviously his singing is the main kind of thing that he went with in the end, but he could have done anything. And you just don't know these people, like they just come along sort of once or twice in a generation, maybe. And it's not like he studied or
No,
where did all that come from?
well, and
Like
this
he just could
is
do
really
it.
what I want to try and get across on this video
Yeah.
is that there's a different type of virtuosity. And with
Yes.
Chris Cornell, when you listen to Black Hole Sun, all that bit at the start is Chris Cornell. Kim
Yeah.
Thile, who is a great guitar player and a very original guitar player,
Yeah, he's
couldn't
very
play that
brilliant.
stuff.
No,
That all
no.
that picking and the drop D and the way the chords, and then you listen to the harmonic movement of it. That's Chris Cornell, and then you watch Soundgarden and you realise he's singing and playing those parts.
Mhm.
I'm, I'm gonna,
Mhm.
I'm gonna tell you a story now that I think you'll like, which I haven't told on my channel, and it's going to be an
Okay.
interesting one. So, if you can just wait
All
there,
right.
you know, I
I
don't.
will do. By the way, Drop D came from grunge. You know that, right?
I know I
Drop
didn't.
D came from the Seattle scene. But we're getting into that
That's
in
that. Yeah,
another time.
I mean, you got Dadgad, haven't you, in the on the folk scene? So that's like
Yeah,
lead
but
tuning, but not to play.
Drop D went round the grunge scene like a virus. It like so, and it was from Soundgarden, and then all of them started because they saw and they were like, oh, what is that? And then they all started doing it. Nirvana started doing it. Alice in Chains started doing it, like because they were. One of the things about the scene was that they all knew each other. They all hung out together, and everything that kind of all the ideas that they had sort of
Yeah,
crossed
yeah,
over,
and yet
and all the friends they had were the same.
they all sounded different though, and
Yeah, they all did
that's
their
the
own
thing.
things with it,
And
but they
I
all
think
did Drop D, like
yeah.
because they've seen
If you just wait
Soundgarden.
there, I'm just going
Yes.
to go and get. You know, I never plan what I'm going to do. No, I mean, I have to say to the viewers. Oh, I just banged my. Oh, you won't hear that. I have to say to the viewers that we were going to do something else, and in true Edward style, I changed it all around just as we are going to start. But I feel we get to. I think we've covered something really. I mean, we've only just opened the door to it, and I'm hoping that the viewers of this channel will now go over to your channel. Can you say what it is again?
JOJO Fry Rocks. Sorry, I say
JoJo
it
Fry
without my
Rocks.
hand in
I
front of my face.
expect you
JOJO Fry
all.
Rocks.
Where are you, viewers? You need to go and subscribe because you haven't got that many subscribers, have you, compared to me?
No, I've got about a tenth, if that. No, not even a tenth, is it?
So
I've
I
got
expect you
nearly
lot to get over
600.
there and subscribe right now. I want to get it over 1,000 by the weekend.
Awesome.
You know, we need this sort of wisdom in the YouTube scene. We need this now. I'm going to show you something. This is my wife's idea. Was to she wanted to do something for charity, and this has been going on for years now. And what this is a snare drum shell.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've been on our travels, we've got it signed
Oh,
all
wow.
sorts of different people. So
Yeah.
that there is Robert Plant. He signed
Cool.
it. If you go around, who's the
Have
other?
you got
That one's
Chad
Mike
from the Red
Portnoy
Hot
from the
Chili
Dream
Peppers?
Theatre.
Oh, Mark, he's awesome, Mike Portnoy.
Steve White from Paul Weller's band. Jonathan Moffat, Michael Jackson's drummer. It's absolutely plastered. Look, Nick Mason, Pink Floyd. And if we go around, I will show you. I have Matt Cameron's signature on here somewhere.
I think I seen it just then.
Did you? Did you?
I saw Matt.
Can you see? It's an incredible thing. And this will eventually be varnished up, and we will make a snare drum out of it, and all these signatures will be in there. Is it that?
Amazing. That's Mike Portnoy. I
Mike
think it was.
Portnoy. I don't know who the bloke is above it. Oh, I was going to. It was a Matt Cameron one. There we go. So
Yeah.
there's Matt Cameron. All right, there's Matt Cameron's signature. So
He's one of the all-time.
one of the greatest
greats,
drummers.
isn't
One
he?
of the greatest drummers. So
Amazing.
my wife is like you, but it's all about Soundgarden. She's in nuts over Soundgarden. And when we were doing this snare drum, she goes, "I want Matt Cameron to sign it." I said, "You'll never get Matt Cameron. That's like in another level of drummers, you know."
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can get these like jazz fusion guys, and I happened to get Nick Mason as a flute. That was a bizarre story. So she goes, I'm going to email him on message him on Facebook. So she messages Matt Cameron on Facebook and says, would you like to start my snare? And we get a message back saying, yeah, we're playing in London today. Come
No.
down and I'll sign your snare. And so I could get home from work, and she says, I've had a message from Matt Cameron. I'm going, no, you haven't. That's just some person who set up on Facebook. They said to go down. And I said, I'm not driving all the way down to London, because they were playing. And said, I'm not driving all the way down to London because somebody on Facebook messaged this. So we agreed. I said I would drive a certain distance, and she'd been given the number of their manager. And so at a certain point, I said, "We'll drive sort of to Oxford from the mid, and then ring the manager up. If there's no answer, we'll turn round. You know, because we'd already ring the manager when we left. So we get down to it, we ring up, we get through to the manager, and it's actually Matt Cameron. It's Soundgarden. We get down, then we park up, and it's like the gig's about to start. It's before the gig, right? They haven't even sound checked. We're there early, so we go around to the side. And I go up to this bloke who looks like a hobo. He's obviously one of the crew, not being knowledgeable and basically being an idiot. And I said, "Excuse me, mate, we've come to see Matt Cameron." And he said, "Okay, no problems. Knock the door and let us in." And my wife turned around and goes, "That's Kim Thile."
Oh my
And so we
God.
go in, and
Oh
Matt is
my
the
God.
loveliest guy in the world. He comes down, we have a big chat to him, and we can hear Chris Cornell. He's up the stairs, and my wife's knees are knocking together because Chris Cornell's up the stairs, and
She would have. I just. Oh, I'd have. I don't know what I'd have done. I think I'd have just ceased to be alive at that point. Probably. I'd have just
being
kind
the
of
bad
died on the
husband
spot.
I was, because we were on a parking meter thing that I paid for. It's like I said, look, can we get it signed? Take the photos. We got to go. And then Matt was going, well, why don't you come to the sound check and just the sound check and hang out with the band? And I was going, no, honestly, I'm a sensible
So
Englishman, and we've got to go.
you
I'll get a ticket.
you could have hung out with Soundgarden
Well, we hung
while
out with
Chris
Matt and
Cornell was
Kim.
still alive, but you didn't because you didn't want to get a ticket.
I didn't want to want to get a parking ticket. My wife
I
brings
think I
up
don't think I could have
many
ever forgiven
misdemeanors
you.
that I have done over the years. This one this one gets brought up, but we do have this, and we've really we're going to sell this for charity, and nobody knows about that. So I'm quite glad I'm talked about it on the channel, because when we get to that point, it'll probably be through the channel that I do that. This has been going on for
That
years and
is
years.
impressive. That's really impressive. Like the amount of signatures that you've
Chad
got on
Smith's
there.
on there.
That's truly.
Chad Smith.
Yeah, I saw that. I think he's drawn a little face or something
Yeah, he
next to
has.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Cool.
Chad Smith story is funny because I used one of my drum clinic contacts. He was doing a drum clinic with Steve White, and we got through this massive crowd, and then we got into this auditorium. It's sort of about a 300-seater auditorium, and there's nobody in there except Chad Smith, was just standing looking at his drums with his back to us. And I thought, what are we going to do? Because we're going to have to start walking past him, come into his line of view, then walk up to him. Because if you approach a famous person, it's always quite weird. And he will be going, "Who's this?" There's nobody else there. It's just him. And so
Yeah.
you have to walk up to him, and you go, "Who's coming up now? Hello, Chad. Hello, Chad. Do you want to?" We can't do this. And my wife goes, "What should we do?" She walk up to us. I said, "No, it's not going to work. It's not going to work." So I said, "I've got a plan." So I walked up behind him, and I hugged him from behind.
And his bodyguards didn't have you.
There was no
thrown
bodyguards
out.
there.
Oh,
And he turned round and he put his arm around me, and I said, "Hello, Chad." And he said, "Hello." I said, "Will you sign our snare drum?" And he went, "Oh, yeah, I'll sign the snare drum." He was really cool about it. He was laughing about it. And then he went over to see Steve White. Steve White says, "Yeah, that's Andy. He's a nutter," basically. And then he came over and gave me a big hug. He was then, but yeah, I've got a lot. These bands, I'd put the Red Hot Chili Peppers in there as well. Incredible bands that created a generation, a certain um, love of guitars, bass, and real playing. And I think we've got the legacy of that. But I do think, in a way as well, with Nirvana, it wasn't the musical thing that they did. It was just the number of records that was sold. I think it completely changed that music from being an underground sort of alternative
Yes,
to
it
then,
crossed over.
yeah,
It crossed over into the mainstream. That's what a lot of people usually call that selling out. And
yeah.
indeed, because I've done a lot of reading and watched a lot of kind of documentaries and stuff about that scene, about the Seattle scene, and
Well,
there's
Will you
quite a
will
lot
you
of.
become my 80s and 90s rock expert? So in the future,
I would
I'm
love
going to talk
to. I
about
would
that
love
rather
to.
than just me try and do it because sometimes I'm talking about bands I don't know anything about. I don't think anyone's noticed, although a few people have.
Oh, you'll get people that who are diehard like Melvins fans who will be like, no, 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 that didn't happen. But the guy from the Melvins, he's quite bitter in some ways about the success of Nirvana, right? Because there were lots, as you said, there were a lot of bands on that scene, some of
They
whom
didn't
got
write the
signed,
songs.
some
This is the
didn't.
whole point. The Melvins are
Um,
great, but they didn't write songs like Nirvana. I mean, Herbie Hancock
yeah,
covers "Come as You Are" on a jazz album. That's how bloody strong it is as a melody.
yeah,
This is
exactly
this is
right.
this is the thing that
They
the people don't
they
understand.
weren't
If they
as
won't,
good.
yeah,
They just
they
weren't
just weren't.
as good.
Yeah, and the reason why Kurt was because he was a virtuoso in his own way. And you've highlighted something very specific that actually in there, there's a whole set of skills that we can sort of pull apart, which are advanced skills, but they're at the
Exactly.
behest of the music, which everybody, even like the most out jazz, the ones that make them good are the ones who are playing musically, opposed to just, blast. I mean, now we've got Instagram and there's loads of people doing, well, I can't stick it. Can't stick it.
No, and I agreed with your video you made a while back about the sort of social media guitarists, where it is you can commend them for their skills and they've obviously put a lot of time into it and they are amazing. It's like physically amazing what they can do, but they're not in
They're
bands
not
necessarily.
creative
They're
musicians.
not making music. They're not
Yeah.
writing songs and putting out albums and inspiring sort of an emotional
Yeah.
response from
Which I think
people.
all the greats do, from the Alan Halfords,
Yeah,
the Al Di Meolas, right through to AC/DC and Status Quo. I mean, Status Quo. There's another band, AC/DC, Status Quo, Nirvana. They're the example of what you said. Nobody can cover the songs
no,
because
it just sounds rubbish when you
you
try
have
to
to
do
get
it.
this like clockwork machine working. Now,
Yeah,
you
it's
being I
lightning in a
think we will
bottle.
do this. We'll do what we were going to do very quickly because it might be interesting to see at the end of this video. Now we've established who you are. I think it's much more important to establish where you're coming from on this video, with the hope that some of my viewers who like that music will go over and subscribe. But you not being a jazz rock fan, I put together a list of 10 songs that may bring you towards you know the genre of kings, jazz rock. So, should we have a quick
So
rundown of those? And if you're interested in what the
yes,
tracks are, I've made a playlist down below. So all you heavy rock fans, I won't say heavy metal fans, all you heavy rock fans, if you want to get into the jazz rock, I've done a list down below that should hold your hand through that a little bit.
and
So
I
number
appreciate
one on
you
my list.
I appreciate you putting this together for me. I've been covering a little bit of sort of this territory in some chats that I've had on sort of jazz more broadly and prog rock, which I did with your mate, the prog corner.
Scott,
Um,
not
yes,
my friend, Scott.
he's your best friend, isn't he?
No, I can't stand the bloke.
But
He's
he was
he's
very.
he's stealing he's trying to do what I do, but in an American way. And when an American does it, it's just simply crass. Don't you think? Don't you find him crass? Come on, I mean, we
No,
can
I
find
don't.
English
I
people.
thought he
We
was.
know what class is, don't we? And Scott
We
hasn't got
do.
it, has it?
He was very fun and very kind and very lovely and very patient in
Oh, you don't know
explaining
anything
prog
about no
rock
one.
to
No
me.
wonder you've only got 500 subscribers. You got to get nasty if you want to get the viewers in.
But I like him. I actually watch
I
his
like him.
channel
That's not the
now.
point. He's American.
He is very, very
His
American. He's
teeth are too
very
white for a man
American.
of that age.
A little bit, little bit. But he's,
But,
you know, he's got to keep up with his wife, hasn't he? She's 20 years younger than him, so
oh, is he?
he's got to make some effort. Yeah,
Oh, he's gone up in my
yeah,
estimation now. As if he's got a young.
yeah.
I tell you, yeah,
There
there's
you
something
go.
going on with that bloke. I tell you, dark past.
I know, I know, I know he is. But he was, you know, he was so cool. He was great. So I've covered, you know, so I am coming at this now with a little bit of just a little bit
But he's
of
more into
sort
the
of,
prog. I've given you a
yeah.
jazz rock list there. So what was the first one I got you to listen to?
So this was the dance of Maya, the dance of the
That's a fire.
Mayans, dance of Maya. Um, and I the first thing I did was I picked up my guitar because I thought, oh, these I like these arpeggios. You know,
Yeah.
it's really um, ominous. It's got a really ominous sort of sound. And for a minute, I was just like, "Hang on, am I doing my death metal video again?" Because I did one of these videos where I sort of got somebody to talk me through death metal, and it sounded very doomy and very sort of it had some of that in it. And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. This pretty interesting. Sort of tried to play along with it, couldn't work it out. Um, it's really weird. But then when it kicks in, it goes more into like blues territory, doesn't it? It's more of like a sort of blues shuffle thing. But then it goes into
But
this sort of,
it is in 28 though.
yeah. I was gonna
The
say
blues in 28.
I couldn't work out the time signature. I thought, yeah, I thought various things, but I couldn't work it out. Um, and then it goes more into this kind of Hendrixy territory. Um, it's got the wah going on, wah pedal. Um,
Well,
so
that's
it's
a
got like a
violin. That is.
blues. Is it? What is it?
That's a violin.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's Jerry Goodman on violin playing through a wah wah pedal.
Oh, right. Okay. Because I thought it had a very distinctive sound, and I was going to ask what sort of guitars they were playing, and it's not a guitar at all.
No, the guitar solo. The thing with the Mavish, the reason why that's number one is the Mavish Yorkshire. They brought that album out in 1971. That's the
Mm,
beginning of it all, as far as I'm concerned.
mm,
That's the
mm,
beginning of jazz rock, and it's also changed the nature of prog. It's also the beginning of progressive metal, and also the Mahavishnu had this incredibly dark, um,
mm.
ominous sound, which then King Crimson picks on. And there's a tiny bit of Mahavishnu DNA, I believe, in Nirvana. It's they
Oh
Nirvana don't
yeah,
sound like punk, like say
yeah.
like the Ramones or Sex Pistols or anything like that. There's a doominess there and a tonal doominess. And you're hearing
I
the first time it was ever done, 71.
Yeah, and by that token, I would say if you look at sort of a lot of what I don't know if you're that familiar with Alice in Chains.
Yeah, I love
Um,
Alice in Chains.
I bloody love Alice in Chains, and I've made a video about Jerry Cantrell, he's one of my guitar heroes. And this is a classic thing that they do in their music. They're obviously heavily influenced by Sabbath, but almost the sort of intervals that they use in their harmonizing and the kind of chord progressions that they use well typically are these haunting sort of ominous sounding
Mm.
sort of progressions that I can see lineage actually where now you've said that from this kind of thing because it's and also the kind of slow pace of it as well, the sort of I mean, it picks up obviously, but just kind of that initial, it's almost hypnotic. And I
Yeah.
would say that about a lot of Alice in Chains stuff as well. So no, I thought it was super interesting. And then it kind of moves into the more bluesy or Hendrixy style stuff. And it sounds like kind of just a long jam then. I don't know if it is or if it was like a composition, because that's what I
Well,
can't tell about this jazz
the
stuff.
arrangement's shifting, so as they go from one side to the next, you'll notice the backing's changing, and
Yeah.
the the riff is in half time with a certain division, and then when they go to that blues, that's in another timing division, and then as the
Mm.
solos develop, you see those timing divisions moved over the top of each other, so it's moving through. You know, because the riff's going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2,
1, 2, or one,
yeah,
and
like that.
then
And
back.
then
Yeah,
the blues is going like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1,
yeah,
1.
like a
And
shuffle.
those two fit mathematically together. And so when he brings the arpeggio back in over the top of that blues at the end, you see all these components. It's a Mahavishnu trick. They would have these what seem like completely disparate, complex rhythmical structures, and then bringing them together at the end, all on top of each other. And it's like, whoa, you know. But yeah, that's the beginning of it all. So what did I give you at number 2 on the list?
So the next track was Lead Boots by Jeff Beck.
What do you
Um,
think to that?
so one of the guitarists that I really love, who I've been to see recently. I mean, he's not just a guitarist; he's a solo artist in his own right. Is Richie Kotzen,
Yeah.
and I absolutely love, and I've always like, I see in his interviews, I've always kind of understood him to be quite a big fan. I think he's a big fan of the Yardbirds. I think he loves Jeff Beck. He's always said that he's into jazz fusion, and you can hear that on a lot of his tracks. And you can, when you go and see him live, he gets into these long kind of
Mm.
jazz fusion-y style kind of jams with his bass player, who's awesome, Dylan Wilson. I don't know if you know of him, but you really should check him out as well. So yeah, this to me, I've never listened to any Jeff Beck before, by the way. So this is the first time I've ever listened to Jeff Beck's guitar playing. And to me, I instantly thought, oh, I can see where Richie Kotzen's getting quite a lot of his stuff from. Like, it seems like this is the original version, you
Now,
know.
I would say that Jeff Beck is perhaps the greatest rock guitarist ever.
I don't know how I've
Vying with
never,
Hendrix.
yeah, I don't know how I've never ever come across him before. I guess like my parents weren't like necessarily into like the Yardbirds or anything, um, and it's just something that I've never really come across before. So I thought, I know of him, and everyone always talks about him. Um, so I thought I really was interested in listening to this to see what is it that he's doing that is. So what was this innovation that
It's,
he
it,
brought?
he's a really strange for a rock guitarist because he emerges like really like beyond everybody in the 1960s, pre-Hendrix, using feedback and distortion. After Clapton, and now Clapton really is important in the history of rock guitar, really, but I think he's not getting the dues that he should. Then it's
I
Jeff.
know you can get in the bin. I'm sorry, I don't like him at all. Um, but I'm much more willing to kind of be convinced about Jeff Beck from just kind of from listening to this track, because
Yeah,
this is way more interesting, I think.
I did a gig once with Eric Clapton, and we were supporting him. And I on my channel earlier on, you can see I'm actually criticizing Eric Clapton's been a bit boring and all that type of stuff.
He
And
is boring and racist, and he can get in the bin.
yeah, I can divide that. I don't, it's like there's some of the jazz musicians I'm a fan of. It's like Miles Davis, it's like some of the stuff he did is a bit, there's a lot of great musicians that when you find out about them, is not. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
Clapton really, I mean, what you do on guitar, what we all do is Clapton. It's the Beano album. That album, he invents rock guitar, and it's an incredible moment. And then
I
Cream
don't know.
invent rock music, pretty much.
I don't know. I just don't. I know he's massively influenced people that I love. So, for example, one of my heroes is Richie Sambora, and Richie Sambora is like the world's biggest Clapton fan. He absolutely idolizes him. But I think he's way better than Clapton. So, you know.
Well, when I did this gig with Clapton, I snuck in under the stage, at the side of the stage, and my ear was literally about 6 foot away from his amp, so I could hear him playing. And I listened to the gig, and that guy, his touch and his tone was unbelievable. Like hearing it in real life,
Mm,
he never went wrong. He never made a choice that was a little bit, oh, it was all on. But I like, and I changed up until then. I really had no time for him. Now the trouble
mm,
with Clapton is that once you get to 71, he never does anything after that. It's
yeah.
just that period in the 60s when he really invents rock guitar. Then Jeff Beck's the next guy.
Hmm.
What Jeff Beck did is all the way through his career up until he died, he changed his guitar sound. So if you listen to the solo on Lead Boots, that is
Hmm.
completely unlike anything else he did. And if you take the solo, say, on Guitar Shop, that's completely like this. And like he is, you have to really bite off Beck because
Yeah.
this is one of the great rock guitarists and the stuff he's doing on guitar. And sometimes that one's a lot more jazz fusion, which is why I chose it. But
Yes, you can
he
hear it.
also does
It's
straight
very
rock albums and very
yeah.
like gutsy, riffy type of stuff. So I think a good one to check out for you by Jeff Beck would be Guitar Shop.
Okay.
Check out
Okay.
Guitar Shop.
I'll
That's a
have a
much more
listen.
rocking album, and he started doing all this tremolo stuff. So he started to solo because
Mm,
he's using a plectrum there. He stopped using a plectrum. It's all fingers, and he
yeah.
plays melodies on the bars. And it's all rock. There's no jazz. There is jazz. So it's really hard to pin him down, but
Well, this one sounds jazzy to me. It's very funky.
yeah,
It's
very
definitely
fun.
got funk.
Yeah,
And the bass line is cool. You know, it's funky, and he's the sort of dissonance sounds to me. It sounds like jazz type,
mm,
like what you'd characterize as jazz chords and stuff. But it does have that. It does have that blues rock thing as well.
yeah.
So I am definitely more. I'm interested in hearing more Jeff Beck stuff.
Definitely, yeah. I think if, especially for your channel, a deep
Yeah,
exploration, we could do that. I'd be quite happy to do something for your channel where we get 10 Jeff Beck tracks, and I can give you a list.
yeah, yeah,
Do something for you.
yeah.
So, what was number
That
three
would
on the
be
list?
cool. Um, so we've got Return to Forever, the Duel of the Jester and the Tyrant,
Yeah,
and so this sounded more like the stuff that I've been listening to in the prog section that I did of my sort of genre exploration. Sounded quite proggy to me, but with a very with a guitar part that sounded to me very much like Santana. It's got that sort of Spanishy
yeah,
feel a little bit, Phrygian feel. The tone as well. It just sounded sort of bit like Carlos Santana. It was very cool, like a laid back sort of groove. Um, I really thought that was really interesting, and I thought that the bass playing was amazing as well.
Andy Clark.
Um, and I think there's a mini moog on it. It's got a section where it goes. It sounds like a bit like a computer game, which I thought was quite fun.
Yeah, there's some
But
like little comedy
yeah,
moments. They do this. They go into this incredible duel, and then literally they're all dueling with each other. Then it keeps dropping down to
yeah,
that little comedy moment. What did you think to Aldi Meller's guitar playing? Because Aldi Meller is really he's the beginning of shred guitar. That's the guy
yeah.
that invented
And
it.
you can,
That's 76. He was doing that in
yeah,
74, playing like that.
that's it.
He
You can
influenced
hear that.
Malmsteen and
Yeah.
those and Vi and all that lot. So that's the beginning. Of,
Yes, and he's obviously this virtuoso player, and it's very, you know, it's very much that kind of fast legato style, isn't
Now
it?
he's picking all the notes with Al. Al picks all the notes. It's insane.
Is he?
Yeah, oh
Or
God, yeah.
sweet picking or
Now
something?
it's all alternate picks. Those got same with John McLaughlin. They're all alternate picked, and it's insane. Like because John McLaughlin will play like arpeggios. He's the guitarist for
Yeah,
Manchester, and you would think, well, he's just going to strum down, but he doesn't. He alternate picks across the string. They're phenomenal. Yeah. Aldi
Very
Meola,
cool.
I still don't think really has been surpassed in terms of his picking. It's just insane.
Yeah. No, it was really sort of, I think, quite accessible, and I that's something that I would put on. I'd have that on. I'd listen to it.
Well, that's
Kind of.
good. So Return to Forever was
Yeah, yeah. I liked that. I liked that. I think had I not, if I hadn't already listened to a few of those prog tracks and some of the jazz stuff, I think I'd have been more confused if I was coming to it cold. But now I've moved. I've broken out a little bit of my little pop and rock box, and everything has to fit the template of, a song with a verse and a chorus and whatnot. Um, Now I'm sort of a bit beyond that, so I can actually start to appreciate some of this stuff a bit more.
who was
Still,
next on the list?
the next one. We've got Tribal Tech, The Big Wave. I was a bit confused by this one because it starts out and it sounds like it's going to be some sort of 80s R&B sound. It sounds like Human Nature,
Yeah.
that Steve Lukather
Mm.
track and Michael Jackson song. And then it suddenly changes and it goes into this sort of like, sounds like funk metal. And then there's like a bluesy guitar part. Um, it, yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing. I'm not sure what's going on there, really. Like, what's the idea? What are they up to?
In the 80s, when the album was made, there was a lot of jazz rock albums that sounded like pop music, sounded like Human Nature. They'd all taken their thing on that. And we would go out and buy these albums, and you'd go and buy something, and then you put it on, and this track would come in, and you go, "Oh, no,
Mm,
it's one of those albums." Um,
mm,
and we were searching for the heavy albums where it was all the fast riffs and ridiculous solos. And so they trick the listener, and they've also the volume is lower, isn't it? So when the track kicks,
yeah,
um,
it's sort of like, oh, it suddenly comes in out of nowhere, and you're sort of like, what is this? Have I accidentally sort of? I thought I'd accidentally kind of pressed the button and gone onto
now
the video.
Scott Henderson, who's the guitarist on that, he is perhaps my favourite guitar player. He's got all the jazz vocabulary and chops, but he can play the blues. He can play the blues,
Mm,
as far as I'm concerned, better than all those like Robert Cray, Steve Ray Vaughan. He can play it better. His touch is incredible. And
mm.
what he did, he's a massive Deep Purple fan, massive Richie Blackmore fan, massive Jimmy Page,
Oh,
and
okay.
he brought
Yeah,
that way of playing back into jazz rock guitar in the 80s. Um,
yeah.
and he has got a way of playing which is incredible. Um,
I did think it sounded almost a bit Steve Vai-ish, actually, in some places. So, I sort of recognise that we have an excellent lead guitarist here. I
well,
don't I don't know any of these people, by the
he's
way. I
done
don't
two
know
albums,
Scott
which
Henderson.
you should have a listen to. He's done an album called Dog Party, and the other album's called Tore Down House, and they're straight blues rock albums. And then you hear him, and he can just outdo anybody else. Scott Henderson's one of the greatest guitarists alive at the moment. He's been on my channel because I'm such
Okay.
a fan, and he's a lovely guy. I went down to see him play live at Ronnie Scott's afterwards, and hung
Oh,
out with
wow.
him a little bit. That he is he's something else. Yeah.
See, this is the value to me of doing these like explorations, because I've never even heard of Scott Henderson before. So he's obviously a guitarist that I need to find out some more about, because I did like it, but like I say, I was a bit, the track in itself I just found a bit sort of confusing,
It's
and
very
I wasn't.
Trouble takes very complex stuff, and lots of
Mm,
chord changes, but it brings in this sort of heavy metal. It brings heavy metal back into jazz rock. I think that's the thing why I put that one on for you. But it's pretty.
yeah, it definitely
I mean,
got,
when you
yeah,
say it sounds like technical metal, those bands were
yeah.
copying tribal tech to a certain extent. What have we got at number five?
So Al Di Meola, and I thought this is probably, is it my favourite one? I can't remember now, but it was really, really good. Race with the Devil on the Spanish
Yeah.
Highway.
So that's the same guitarist
Um,
that's in Return to Forever, and that sort of hit that. You know what Aldi Meola did when he left Return to Forever. He made a number of albums that were like jazz rock. They were very proggy, but he
mhm.
brings in this Spanishness
Yes, even
heavy
more.
guitar sound, and you really that is your blueprint for all the 80s rock guitar. You know,
It
basically.
reminded me of yes, Heart of the Sunrise. This one.
Well,
It
Heart
just
of the Sunrise is before that, and I was talking to a
oh
young
okay.
man the other day, and I said Heart of the Sunrise is really the beginning of prog metal because that riff
Mm,
is like this 1971 when they did that, and that's really so. I'm quite interested in the developments through rock music because
mm,
a lot of these things come from jazz fusion or prog. They come through in different ways, you know. And I came up in that 80s
yeah.
um, shred thing, and that's my generation. We did end up with quite a lot of chops because we weren't listening to Nirvana, we were listening to like Racer X and Malmsteen. So that was what I came up with.
Well, yeah, it does sound, it's got a similar thing to that Heart of the Sunrise. It's a bit proggy, but I can also kind of hear that same Spanishy influence that. So I didn't realize that was the same
Yeah,
guitarist. But yeah, it's got that Santana thing. But this one sounds a lot more like 1970s for some reason. It's just got a more, I don't know, something that I associate with 70s. But yes, then the next one is Bad Intent. Show me what you can do. And again, this is like the 1970s.
no, that's 1990s. That is
Is it?
that's like sort of 94. And the
It's
reason
got a
I gave it,
wah wah. It sounds really like
oh yeah, they did, but the guitarist on that is Frank Gambale, and Frank Gambale is the guitarist who invented sweep picking. It's a very
right,
rare example of a like Larry Graham with slap bass. Frank Gambale invented sweep picking, right? People had strummed across and done, but
yeah,
he developed a method that was only economy or sweep picks. And
right.
so he's hugely influential on guitar playing, and he is able to pull off insane stuff on the guitar.
But I didn't feel like it was very musical, if you like. This particular track,
Mm.
it's very what he's doing is kind of clashing with kind of what the bassist is doing, and it's. I mean, I guess that happens a lot in jazz. That's
Well,
a jazz thing. But
the problem you got here is that in the 70s with Aldi Meola, those albums were selling millions of copies. They were huge,
mm,
literally millions of copies. They were charting, and so they had huge budgets. With that album, that's on a small label, and it's basically because I spoke to Scott Henderson about these albums that came out
mm,
in the 90s, these 90s fusion albums. They didn't have much time to do them, so they're in there. They get work out. They get a chart
mm,
that on that track, it's Frank Gambale. Then on bassist Stuart Ham, who came to prominence playing for Steve Vai, and then he's the guy that really brought tapping and all that stuff on the bass.
yeah,
Original guy for that. This is what I gave you a lot of guitar players, and then the drummer is Steve Smith, and he's a jazz fusion drummer now. But he started off in Journey. He's the drummer with Journey.
mm,
They're all jazz fusion musicians, so that's what that one is. But I just want
mm.
to think of Gambali's insane sweep picking.
Yeah. No, it was kind of mind-blowingly, good, but in the sense of like as a musical piece overall, um, that I found that a more difficult one, more challenging one
Mm.
to actually listen all the way to the end. Um,
I, I,
because it
I,
didn't.
you like complex structure. You like the prog. You like Aldi Meola and Return to Forever when there's actually quite a lot of goat structure going on.
Yeah,
Not complexity you don't like. What you don't like is when just people start then just like you say they're just jamming, and
yeah.
it's just start.
When I
That's
don't, when
really
I can't
interesting.
follow it,
Yeah,
I'm not sure what they're doing or where it's going. So yeah, that is right. Actually,
yeah,
I think you're
that's
right.
yeah.
So yeah, I struggled a little bit on that one. Um, and then the next one is it John Schofield, The Nag,
Yeah,
which I thought was really that was great. I thought it was really fun. Um, it's really stylish, like the playing is really cool, isn't it?
yeah.
It's really
So Schofield's another
super
guy who brought the
cool.
blues in, but he brings it in another way, and he's quite his jazz vocabulary is incredible, but he's got that dirty, grindy style
Yeah,
of playing. And, he's gone on to do a lot of sort of real New Orleans funk stuff, which now I know what you like. I would redo this list.
yeah.
There's a lot of really fast stuff on there and a lot of insane guitar solo stuff, but there's a whole
But
bunch
I
of
like funk, you know, I do. I like kind of and you know, anything that's got that kind of that beat, that
mm,
bass line, you know, that kind of gutsy funk rhythm and feel, you know. And I thought this was really cool, um, especially with the kind of like the spacey and whizzy sound. I don't know
yeah,
what that
yeah.
was all
I'm used to
about,
the
but it was
live
fun.
version. And when I listened to that version for you, I thought, what's all these whizzy sounds on here? Because I'm used to the one-off pick hits. What's the next one on the list? What we got next?
Um, so this was my favourite one. Um, it's Pat Metheny, Roots of Coincidence.
Again, very tightly controlled, very
Um,
little soloing going on.
this was my favourite one. It starts off. It sounds like it's going to be like a Depeche Mode song, you know, which I love, like absolutely
Yeah.
love Depeche Mode. Um, but initially, I thought, oh, this is like a 80s synth electronica thing. What, you know, where's this going? But of course, it goes everywhere, um, into all kinds.
Pat
Um,
Metheny is essential listening for any guitarist because it's way past the guitar.
mhm.
It's just unbelievable music, and he just takes you on a
The
journey.
tone, though,
Yeah.
the tone of his guitar as well, I thought that was beautiful.
He
I
normally
really did.
plays with a very soft jazz guitar sound. On that album, he was experimenting with a fretless guitar. And when he started
Ah,
overdrive, and when he
okay.
started to put overdrive, we were all like, "Oh my God, Pat Metheny's got distortion," because he was known for having the sort of classic Wes Montgomery style sound. But Pat Metheny again, you've just got to. It's like Jeff Beck. You've just got to get your head in, and for you,
Mm,
like the colours and all these things, because at the end that almost turns into almost like an orchestral piece. After it's all,
yeah,
yeah. I'll send you a couple of links that I got
brilliant.
a much better idea of what sort of tracks you would like from doing this. Quite interesting.
Yeah, I could definitely get into that. I think.
What's
I
next?
just then we've got Alan Holdsworth, um, Out from Under, which I thought was probably the most rock or recognizably
Well, I
rock.
picked a very as rock as Holdsworth gets for a rock
This,
listener to listen to with a
yeah,
riff and
yeah.
all. He doesn't normally do that. It's and
And is it?
vocals on it as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it him singing as well?
No, it's a guy called
No.
Paul Williams singing.
Okay. Because I wasn't sure whether he sung or not. It's a good vocal as well. But it's a nice, you know, it's a fairly complex song, but it's got a nice like melody line to it. Like it's much more of a song,
Mm,
as it were. So it's kind of more something that I would be used to listening to.
yeah.
Um, but I thought the riff was cool. It was a bit Zeppelin, maybe,
Mm.
kind of heavy. You know, it's got
What
this
about the
kind of.
guitar playing?
I thought it was the kind of more or less what I was starting to expect from this list. It was quite proggy, quite kind of just quite just a good solid, you know,
Because
guitarist.
you see, anyone who's watching it on my channel, we have now got to the guy that I would say, and most of the viewers on my channel would say, is the greatest guitarist that's ever lived by a
So
mile.
I know of his reputation, and I haven't heard any of his playing, and so I was kind of expecting somewhere in this track some sort of epic solo, um, but that sort of didn't happen. It didn't transpire. So I was thinking, you know, when is it gonna? When are these
Probably because
fireworks
I've
gonna?
sent you one of the more songy ones because
Okay,
Holdsworth stuff is difficult. If
okay,
you really want to get lost, Holdsworth will lose you. He is just on another level, without doubt. I'd say greatest musician of the second half of the 20th century of all musicians, definitely the greatest guitarist that's ever lived. And when you
A lot of people say that. I've heard
It's
that a
it's
lot.
just astonishing. What he did on the guitar in every aspect was astonishing in terms of tone, in terms of the
Mm,
technology of the guitar, in terms of the technique and what you could
mm,
physically play on the guitar, and also the harmonic language. And his harmonic language is so advanced. And there's a guy that I interviewed on the channel. He's done a video which is 5 hours long trying to go through the harmonic structures of it. It's just like
Do
another
you
world.
think? Do you think? Right, this is a serious question. Like, do you think in order to appreciate some of these things, some of these musicians, and some of this music, do you think that you do actually need some sort of grounding in music theory or some sort of,
I don't think it's
knowledge of?
I don't think it's a grounding in music theory. What it is, and I hate to say it, it's a grounding in ear training. It's a
Mm,
distinct thing. It's the ability to hear. So if I listen to like most pop songs or most rock songs, it's just so dull to me, and I know it's my fault because my ears want to hear certain. I love the richness of it, and so
yeah.
there's a thing with jazz where they play outside. And what that is it's taking the cadence in music. So if you've got a G major, and a G is going to a C major, well, that dominant chord inside that it unlocks certain worlds. And jazz musicians have explored these worlds. And a lot of these musicians, like say someone like John Coltrane, they're actually trying to free music and they're trying to push at the limits of music. And someone like Holdsworth is an incredibly emotional player. But rather
Mm,
than it being in the bends, it is in the
hmm
way that these huge slabs of harmony pass over you. Now, I can remember when I was very young and I was into rock music and I first started listening to Fusion, I remember thinking, I really like it, but the keyboard just keeps playing wrong chords. I wonder why they left all these wrong, but they just sounded like wrong chords to me. But now when
Sometimes
I
it
hear,
does. It sometimes sounds like it's sharp or flat, or it's not quite the right. So it doesn't resolve in the right way.
hmm,
It
now,
does
to
sound
me,
wrong
that
a
is the
bit.
peak. That's the bit that's making my hair stand on end, and that's the thing that's really hard to get across because people will go, "This is the Emperor's New Clothes," and they will think Holdsworth is just technical, and a lot of these guitarists on there they'll think it's technical, whereas actually for me the emotional response to this music is so much more than if I just put on even Soundgarden and rock bands I like. It's not the same experience as listening to these types of music.
Mm.
Is that the last one, or did I put anything after Hot?
No, there is another one. We've got Mike Stern.
Yeah,
After all,
I'll put a nice gentle one at the end.
very, very, very gentle one. My only issue with this one, is that I don't really like woodwind instruments. Saxophone, is not really my thing, and so this, like, I was
You're a
immediately
proper rocker, aren't you?
I
You
just
know who
don't
else
like
doesn't
it.
like saxophone?
Who?
Robert Bloody Plant. I had an argument with him about it once. I said he said something, and he said, "Oh, I don't really like saxophone." Robert, how can you not like saxophone? I think he
I
likes the
just
honking rock
don't.
and roll saxophone. He likes a bit of that, but he don't
Um,
like all the jazz fannying around.
this just wasn't like, to me. It just sounded like, it could have been like a theme, like from an '80s movie. It sounds like it could have been, or a theme tune from an '80s show with that saxophone thing. I'm not saying it wasn't good. Like, it's obviously a really proficient piece of music.
Yeah.
Sure,
But
it's
what
very
about Mike
nice.
Stern's guitar playing?
Well, I thought it was very, like, again, '80s soft rock. It sounded to me like
Oh,
more
Mike.
so than.
I hope Mike's not watching this. When,
That's not a bad thing. Like, I love '80s soft rock. That's
yeah, but
cool.
I wouldn't describe Mike Stern as soft rock.
Um, but
I've
I
I've
think it's
picked
in the
some of the wrong track.
context of
Now
the
I've seen
genre.
it. Now I know this is the thing. This is the thing about music is that when you do something like this, it actually brings people together because I'm going, oh, I know what you like now. I can see, and I'm with you. I'm like, yeah. There's a part of me that goes, yeah, it's a bit too much saxophone, a bit Seinfeld, isn't it? A little bit too. think.
It's not quite that, not
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah. I know.
degree, but
I
I
shouldn't have played that Mike Stern, and I feel bad for Mike Stern. I think I should have put one of these ones on.
no,
You
it's
know.
clearly a good. It's clearly a great song. He's obviously a great musician, and it's a personal. Like all these things are just so personal and subjective, aren't they? And
I
we all
to
have
some
things that
extent,
we
it's just
don't.
there's. I know exactly where you're coming from, and I can feel it. And then you get an idea of who the person is, and you also know where they're coming from. It's just an interesting thing because I really believe music brings us together. This is the whole point: is it brings everyone together, and it's like you know you could you could be in a room with someone you absolutely disagree with, say politically or religious or all these things, but if they play well and they make your hair stand on end, you want to play with them. And I've got so many friends like that and I love them. And I've always said this: music is made out of love. It's basically it's the love of the music, it's the love of the people, and it's
It
people
is.
emanating out. And I
It
really
is.
believe that is so important.
Well, so did Kurt Cobain, and that was the whole point of Nirvana, and the whole meaning of it to him was that it was this freedom of expression, freedom to be who you want to be, and the inclusiveness of, well, what he found in punk anyway was the sort of inclusiveness of that and the freedom of that. And I think those two things, sort of inclusiveness, freedom, and that sense of community, being part of something, I think that is, like you say, that's the most important thing. And the whole thing about music is that it's to be played and performed for an audience of people who you have brought together.
Together,
And
yeah,
then you,
this
as
is it.
a performer and audience, are together in that experience and sharing it. So
And one of
that
the
is
one of
the
the
most
things I
important
find
thing.
interesting with YouTube is since I've been doing it, I have amassed a whole bunch of people around me, and they're all different. They've all, there's so many different people that have been brought together by a thread. And it's like you're not into the prog and the fusion, but we've still made contact. And what it is that we love music, and that's why I say it's made out of love. We love it. We don't like it. We love it. It's you know what I'm saying. It's a
Yeah,
different type of thing. And
yeah,
it took me when I was younger. It was all about competition and trying to beat. But now I realise if you go towards that part of life, it's an incredible thing. And since I've been doing the channel, I was an atheist when I started doing the channel. I'm not an atheist anymore because I realise there is something greater than us, um, and I don't know what it is, right? But there's been too many strange things happen through this channel, and part of it is just I am now all these heroes I've been listening to for 40 years. I mean, Aldi Meola that we're talking about. I was texting him yesterday. He might be coming on the channel, trying to organise it. And when I
oh
see
my
these
goodness,
people,
wow.
I interviewed Jean-Luc Ponty, which is another god to me, and to see them and what I see in them is they respond to my love for them, and it's humbling. And then you can see they're humbled as well because I love the music, and I love their music, which means in a way, I love them. I don't love them like I love my dog, but it's a different thing. So, and I think that's what's really important, and we should all remember that. And I think that's the fundamental message of my channel is that we're all brought
Yeah,
together by this, and we should all, you know, remember
yeah.
there's something more important than points of view. There's the appreciation of beauty, the most important thing.
Absolutely, it is the most important thing. And I've had discussions with people who regularly sort of engage with me on my channel, where we could have fallen out, or I could have blocked people, but actually, we've managed to sort of talk things through and come together because we have this kind of mutual thing that we all love.
Yeah,
And whether it's like guitars themselves, whether it is certain bands or certain genres, there's always, I think there's always something that you can relate to. You can always find a level on which you can relate to someone, and you can hold different opinions and hold different points of view as long as you are respectful towards each other,
yeah, and I
which
think
I
that
always hope to be.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I'd always
I
try
think
to.
there's uh, there's just so much to be learnt from music and art and beauty. There's just so much that we need to keep in touch with that. I think that's so important. I think we at this
Please.
point we can't go any higher than this, so we've got to a natural end. So shall we say goodbye to everybody? And before we go, tell them where your YouTube channel is, if there's anybody watching at the end of this mammoth interview.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us, if anyone
Yeah.
has.
And then if you went, anyway.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's really been fascinating talking to you. I absolutely loved it. My channel is JOJO Fry Rocks on YouTube. If you want to go and see some really mediocre guitar covers of 80s and 90s tunes, there's plenty for you over
Come on,
there.
you lot. You all love this, really. You all love your Nirvanas, you all love your Soundgards, and you really love your Bon Jovis. And I'm not going to be dealing with it on my channel. I ain't going to sully my musicianly fingers and my musicianly ears with dealing with Bon Jovi, although I do quite like them. I've got nothing against John Bon Jovi. You know, I can stick with them. You know, I like Tico Torres, great drummer. But, you know, I'm not going to be, you know, delving that low down on my channel.
It's beneath you. It's beneath you, Andy.
It is beneath me. But if you want someone who is willing to come up from underneath and deal with the scraps, you could go there now. And if you don't subscribe, I expect to see some comments there as well saying, Andy sent me over here and I've come
I'll screenshot. I'll screenshot.
Yeah, I want to see some love. I'm trying to help get this channel up off the ground because there's some good stuff. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was something good. So come on, you lot. Oh,
thanks so much.
I'm just showing you. I go for the sort of subtle marketing.
That is, that is clearly
it's called shame.
It's clearly much more effective than me just saying, "Oh well, if you've got some thoughts, put some comments on my video."
No, gotta get nasty. You gotta get nasty. It's the only way to bring the viewers in. You got to get nasty and right wing. You're far too left wing. You are. Anyway, shall we say goodbye to everybody?
Bye.
Bye bye everybody.
Bye bye.